So January 15, 2009, some Canadians got in the way of a Airbus 320 taken off of LaGuardia. Hits the water, and we're at a bar seeing the news cover. It's my wife's birthday. Not when it happened, but later that night. And my wife fortunately said, I wonder how they're going to get the plane out of the water. And I have to give her 100% credit. I used to joke that it was one of the voices in my head, but I think it was really her. And I was like, I know who's going to do this. So I call my contact, Jason, and I was like, hey, do you have this job? And he calls me back later that night and is like, we don't know yet. I'm gonna find out at like 10 a.m. tomorrow, but I can't pick up my phone because I'm going to be in a meeting with the Coast Guard and the FBI talking logistics. So call Tom Weeks, Weeks Marine, who owns all the cranes, and he's like, Tom always answers his phone. And fortunately, Tom had been at that pickup job for the Concorde, so we had just met like 2 months before. So while we were on the phone, I was like, hey, it's Steve, the photographer. We met back on the Concorde. She was like, oh yeah, what's going on? I was like, did you get that job? He's like, what job? I was like, with the airplane in the river. Oh, I was like, yeah, we got it. You want to work? Yeah, thank you, B&H, for having me again. We've had a long, nice working relationship, and I've spoken here a couple of times and produced a bunch of content for the event space, so it's good to be back in person. All right, yeah, I went to RIT. I graduated in the mid-'90s. I got to New York to assist. I wanted to find out my own path. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get where I wanted. I just knew I wanted to shoot. I wanted to be able to make work that was going to work both being commissioned and on the wall. I already had a body of work from college. I met a friend that was living in an illegal basement under a Thai restaurant in Soho. We did our first pop-up show in his space in the 90s. Then we did another pop-up show up at there was a homeless shelter, halfway house thing happening in Hell's Kitchen. But I'm just moving around, showing, I'm getting assisting work, building up the network, making friends. Start traveling. I've got family in Europe, so I was really comfortable going back and forth and everything. And a close friend of mine that I had gone to college with was from Vienna. And one of the relationships that I had in New York collapsed in the middle of an international trip, so I ended up with a spare plane ticket. So flew to Vienna to see my friend, ended up abducting her best friend and marrying her. But yeah, so as we're doing this, 2000, I get picked up by a couple of different stock agencies, non-stock, Image Bank, and I'm traveling around looking for locations that I can photograph. And I keep getting drawn back to the industrial locations while I'm doing this. This was a logging camp that we found up in the snow in the Alps, probably Switzerland, but it might have been Austria. This was a turbine, one of the big windmills being installed in Austria. That is the car that we actually arrived in, just to give you a little sense of the scale. And so I just kept on walking further and further back with my 4x5, trying to figure out, how far back do I have to be so I can actually get the whole thing in frame without tilting up too much. And then we just sat there and waited for 3 hours for the light. What's up? This was at a recycling plant in Shelter Island. It's kind of funny that Dirk just got in here because our mutual friend actually brought us to this location, but there was a little bit of tension about getting in there because she wanted to keep this location to herself because we were sharing the same photo editor at Image Bank. And so we had to cut a deal where she would get to shoot, I would shoot on the same day, she would submit her photographs first and then make the selects and then look at mine. So make sure that I was never overstepping our boundaries, but yeah. So as I'm producing this work and everything, I'm going to meetings, I'm seeing art directors, I'm going to portfolio reviews, and at some point I applied for one of the PDN portfolio reviews, and I got in, and it was a 2-day event, and I met a book agent, and she was looking at the industrial landscape, and I was just like, would like to do a book with me. And I was like, that's amazing. I would love to do a book too. But I didn't feel like I had a body of work at that point because it was all of these random locations. And so we're brainstorming what to do about the idea. And my wife and I kind of came up with the idea to focus on the recycling industry. And so I hired a writer and put together a proposal and started sending it around to some of the local companies and people asking, telling them about, I'm working on this book about the recycling industry in America. Would you let me in to shoot? And a couple of people said yes, including, it is now Sims Metal Management. It was a different company at the time. But, and I fortunately arrived when the ship was in there loading scrap metal to go to a foundry in Turkey. And so this is up on the deck there. This was an electronics recycling plant in Minnesota. I just love the floppy disk that is like strapped in there, like just holding on for dear life. These were blasting mats. This popped up on my search somehow. They're used at construction sites to protect the underground for heavy machinery going across, and also when they blow shit up. So I just love the texture of these things. And this company out in, I think we're in Vermont, let me in to photograph this. This was a paper mill in Minnesota. It was like 97% post-consumer waste that they used for the boxes, and they got me to shoot the press. And these are bales of saran wrap. So you know those big pallets that come into like Target and everything that are like wrapped in saran wrap? So that plastic is very recyclable. And so the guys there at this company told me each bale, and this is like 15 years ago, each bale of this is like worth thousands of dollars. So yeah. So as I'm shooting my industrial landscape, and I'm shooting some lifestyle for stock, for Image Bank and everything, but I was really kind of trying to keep the two bodies of work separate. I had a case where I had like a printed portfolio of the industrial landscape and this like tiny portfolio slipped in of the lifestyle. And I was showing this to an art buyer at an ad agency, and she was telling me, it's like, listen, I really like your work, but if you don't have photographs of the workers holding the equipment and working in these job sites, I am not going to be able to bring it back to my clients. And I was really resistant to this because it's like, no, this is like landscape is like my work, and the people work is like the stuff that I do for you. But it was kind of that Venn diagram moment where I was just like, all right, if the person that is telling me that is like potentially getting me at least to the possibility of getting hired, I may need to listen to her. So I took her advice, put an ad out on Craigslist. This is pre like social media and everything, just telling I'm looking for actors. We'll do a photo shoot, pay you a little bit of money. I need a signed release on it, but we'll go to find some of these locations. And this was one of the locations in New Jersey, close to the shipyard. But while I was out there shooting this project, I found this. So I had heard about New York City's artificial reef project in the New York Times, and I had just read about it. It was an image of one of the redbirds getting thrown into the Atlantic, and I was just like, this would have been perfect for my recycling project. So when I spotted the barge, I went up to the security guard, and I was like, hey, what is that? And he was like, oh, that's the MTA's artificial reef project. I was like, really? And it's like, I've got a recycling project. And he's like, I'm just a security guard. I was like, I understand. Who do I need to call? And he got me in touch with the engineer that was responsible for the project. I told him about my idea. He liked the sound of it. He talked to the MTA. The MTA guy that was running it, fortunately, was also on board. And so they got me access to get in to start photographing the project. And I'll get back to some more of those photographs in a minute. So I'm starting to build my relationship with Weeks Marine. They called me. A ferry had sunk at one of the piers in New Jersey. And because of where and how it had sunk and everything, they actually had to break up the ferry on site. So they brought a crane to Weehawken, and they had this giant guillotine blade that they were dropping into the water. So they're just dropping this like 30,000-pound piece of steel into the boat and beating it up. And then they would go back in with the claw to pick up the debris. It was a tough day to shoot. I got there too late. It was noon. It was bright sun. I wasn't really happy with the photographs. Might have been a tiny bit hungover. But regardless, this photograph worked out. I'm happy with it. So we do this project, and then 2 months later, give or take everything, they call and it's like, I don't know if you're interested, but tomorrow we're picking up this. So Weeks has this giant rotating crane, all right? And this is a little bit of a cheat. This is not the original photograph that I shot back from 2008. This is one of the recent images from the Concorde. But they had been hired to move the Concorde back to the Intrepid. The Intrepid Aircraft Museum had been in, I believe, Staten Island for a retrofit to get the pumps fixed and patch it up and everything, and was getting it towed back. And so they had parked the Concorde in Brooklyn. And so they picked it up from Brooklyn and stuck it onto a barge, and then towed it from Brooklyn back to New Jersey. That was when they remembered, oh, maybe we should have a photographer take some pictures of this for us. So they fortunately called me. I went out to Jersey with them and then ended up riding with them with the Concorde. So I am very happy that I have ridden with the Concorde and never got to ride on the Concorde. But I have been inside 2 of them. I don't know if any of you have been in any of them in the museum, but it's very tiny. Like, I'm 6 feet tall and I can barely stand up straight in this thing. And it's a 2-and-2 setup. But yeah, so this was one of the shots of it coming back up to the city. So January 15, 2009, some Canadians got in the way of a Airbus 320 taken off of LaGuardia. Hits the water, and we're at a bar seeing the news cover. It's my wife's birthday. Not when it happened, but later that night. And my wife fortunately said, I wonder how they're going to get the plane out of the water. And I have to give her 100% credit. I used to joke that it was one of the voices in my head, but I think it was really her. And I was like, I know who's going to do this. So I call my contact, Jason, and I was like, hey, do you have this job? And he calls me back later that night and is like, we don't know yet. I'm gonna find out at like 10 a.m. tomorrow, but I can't pick up my phone because I'm going to be in a meeting with the Coast Guard and the FBI talking logistics. So call Tom Weeks, Weeks Marine, who owns all the cranes, and he's like, Tom always answers his phone. And fortunately, Tom had been at that pickup job for the Concorde, so we had just met like 2 months before. So while we were on the phone, I was like, hey, it's Steve, the photographer. We met back on the Concorde. She was like, oh, yeah, what's going on? I was like, did you get that job? He's like, what job? I was like, the airplane in the river. Oh, I was like, yeah, we got it. You want to work? Yes. I was in the city. I was at my office at Union Square at the time. I had packed my camera. I was all ready for this and everything. I had a brand new GPS. I was really excited. Got into the car. I'm like telling my office mate, I got the job. I'm going down. And they're like, do you want to just meet us there? And I was like, no, I want to come in on the water because if I arrive, NYPD is not going to let me pass security. I know I'm not going to be able to get around the security barrier. So I want to get on the boat. I was like, all right, but get down here because we're leaving. So I get in my car, I'm leaving, I'm driving down, I got my GPS, I plug in the address, and that that weird GPS where you have to put in like the street first and then the numbers and everything, and I put in the wrong address. So I'm sitting here, and I know where I'm supposed to be, but the GPS keeps on telling me to get back onto 14. And the problem was I had actually put in the corporate office address, which is like 30 minutes further down on the turnpike. But if you've ever been at the Jersey ABCDEFGX6 God 14C exit, when you've got somebody calling saying, we have a tugboat that is leaving, where are you? It was a little stressful, but I did make it. So anyway, so Jason is the guy that is, you can just kind of like see his nose and his lips on the top of the frame. That was my contact that has changed my life and my career forever. And that is a engineer from Airbus holding a model of the Airbus 320 that they just happened to have picked up at LaGuardia Airport or JFK, I guess, probably, when they landed. They went to the toy store, and they just happened to have a 320 in the toy store. So they were sitting there discussing, based on their luck at the toy store, about where the center of gravity is of the aircraft, so they can pick it up. This is one of the first photographs of me that I really like when I was arriving. It's titled Whale. I've just always kind of seen this as like the wounded animal. And it's like, the ladder's there's the blowhole. It's like, don't worry, you're going to fly again. It's going to be okay. Another funny story about this is that when the aircraft finally got sold onto auction, they did not mention the fact that it was like underwater. It just said non-flyable. It's like the worst Carfax, ever. It was, at the time, one of the coldest weekends that New York had had in decades, so ice had come down. These are the divers that are down there. They're like checking for where to put the sling in. Oh, sorry. Go back to that for a second. That's titled Wing. The Coast Guard had used some line, I think just from the boats, to tie the aircraft off to the pier. It's now drifted down. We're down at like Chambers. The rope broke. The current was too strong, the way, just the resistance of the boat and the current. So the plane's starting to sink. And so the plane had kind of like flipped up. And it's not like super fast, but I'm like shooting away just getting this. There's probably a little time lapse I can make of this at some point. And then here it is coming out of the water. So I'm standing underneath the crane, kind of like jumping back and forth. The crane has got, it's probably like 3 or 4 stories tall, and you've got ladders that will connect to the different platforms, but you have to be a little careful about when you go up because the platform's moving, so you don't want to get off. So I'm just like communicating back and forth with the crane operator to like get both like the straight on shot, the overhead shot, like close up and just moving back and forth. So they tow it back to New Jersey. I had gone home. I'd come back every once in a while and photographing when they're removing the parts and everything. And then I see that they're going in and out of the aircraft. And NTSB is there and everything. And I'm there. I've got my Weeks like life jacket on, my helmet and everything. And at some point, I just asked NTSB, it's like, can I go in and photograph? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I almost like said, are you sure about this? But I was like, he said yes. Don't question his authority. So I got in and I was able to photograph. And this is the image from the cockpit. And this was one of the images that kind of like broke national news when this came out. So I put this out in a e-blast, and I've got a bunch of photo editors on my list that I've like, you know, because the mailing list that I purchased and meeting them at the portfolio reviews, and it gets picked up by the New Yorker. And so it starts making circulation on some of the photo blogs, and like people are calling about running these photographs, because I ended up being the first photographer back in the aircraft before anybody else. So that then gets into the desk of the NTSB, and NTSB is like, why are these photographs out there? This is still an active investigation. So we pull the photographs down, and I'm just like slightly, you know, freaking out, but not crazy yet, because it's only, you know, it's only the federal government that's asking me not to do this. And then the pictures go back up, and then AIG calls. AIG was the insurance agent for US Airways. They did not want photographs of their airplane crashed anywhere at any time. And the lawyer that sent the polite but kind of official cease and desist, when I asked him, like, when will it be okay for these photographs to be released, he was like, never. And I was just like, so I take them off of the website, but I put a sticker, like a little just like, you know, Photoshop version of a Post-it saying that the photographs of the US Airways, you know, Miracle on the Hudson landing have been removed at the request of US Airways and AIG. And so the lawyer's answer went from no, never, nothing to, Mr. Mallon, how can we help you? Because they got so much pushback about why are you having the photographs taken down? Because it was a good story. You know, everybody survived. The engine, the plane itself performed incredibly well. And I've met Sully a couple of times. He is very thankful that it all played out the way that it did. The aircraft was designed to hit the water up to like 90 miles an hour. It hit at 150. So the airframe was not designed to take this amount of impact. It was full of fuel. They could have hit a boat. They could have hit a lot of things, but they all survived, thankfully. So this is one of the photographs. This was also kind of a nice, fun story. They're moving the airframe to another facility. Getting back to the 1 in 9, you know all those bridges at the 1 in 9, Jersey, truck and everything? Well, somebody mismeasured one of them, and so we could not clear it. So instead of having like a 45-minute drive to this pop-up tent that they had built, we now had a 6-hour drive. So we're going back up through the suburbs of New Jersey to get to a bridge that is high enough that will clear the airframe on the back of these trailers. So this is titled 30,000 Gallons. Okay. So those photographs had picked up a bunch of national news, and I had met an art dealer, one of the gallerists, at these portfolio reviews that I had helped produce for ASMP. And I showed him that body of work, and he liked it and ended up giving me a solo show in September. The show goes well. Some of the passengers show up. It's picking up more press. CNN comes. They're getting, it's building momentum. So they bring me down to one of the art fairs in Miami. It's one of the satellite fairs. It's not one of the main ones, but this picture was one of the ones that they were showing. And this was like half of the sales for the booth. And so they said, if you can go back and flesh out this project a little bit more, we can probably do another solo show. I was like, that sounds fine. Originally, it was just like a chapter in this recycling project, but I was like, all right, let's go back out and shoot a little bit more. So I called up the MTA and like, yeah, come on down. So here's the cars. This was a generation of the subway cars that had this like plexiglass face on them that was kind of supposed to make it look like they were aerodynamic, but were completely useless and actually made the cars smaller. So they had to take that off before they put it in the ocean. This picture is titled Settling, but we've kind of nicknamed it Ghost Train just because it kind of looks like the little subway car that could be just like chugging along in the ocean. This was the day that everybody lost their breakfast. Note to everyone, do not edit your photographs on a rough sea day in the back of your camera. This is titled Pool. This has been shown in quite a few political exhibitions recently. All right, so kind of wrapped up that project. We go out to the final drop and everything, and I get a call, and it's from Mike Zacchia. It was the MTA contact and everything's name. It's like, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but they're sinking another ship for the same reef. And so he gets me in touch with the contractor. And I think that he initially thought that I was going to be able to somehow like get him to the MTA as a contractor somehow. But regardless, he was happy to let me down. So he brought me down. So this is a destroyer that they were prepping at the Philadelphia Navy Yard and then towed out to Delaware to sink. And this is one of the holes that they were cutting on the side. This is actually while we were out on site. And it was a fun, toxic shoot because the fumes are like building up on the inside and the ship is sitting there moving. So you've got the sparks going, you've got the sunbeams going, but you're trying to like get this like moment of sparks, highlights on him, and without like choking to death because it was a little toxic. This is inside the pilot house. I've just always loved the abstract aspect of this. I've always been a painter in denial. I cannot paint, but when I can find subjects that I can shoot in like an abstract fashion, this is something that really resonates with me. I did get in contact with some of the Navy sailors that served on this ship, and they have an annual meetup. And so at some point, I'm going to bring them these photographs and ask them if they can like explain what all the markings mean. This was a nice pickup from the Navy Yard shoot. It didn't really have anything to do with the destroyer that they were prepping, but it was one of the dry docks right next to where they were shooting. And I asked the people that owned it if it was okay to photograph. And I've just always loved this image because it looks like an archaeological site. It's like the space you would find in Rome. And I've just always been curious about like whose office is there. And there she is. One thing about this picture that I have to tell you that I don't talk about too often is that I'm on the front end of the tugboat shooting, and my 7200 is down at the other end of the boat, and I've got the 24-70 on the Canon. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm trying to decide, like, what is more important? Like, this is the camera angle. Like, I'm really happy with how things are framed, but I'm not as tight as I wanted to get. And it was just like, do I stay here and keep shooting with the lens that I'm not happy with, or possibly run down and possibly miss the picture? So this is not as tight as I would like. I think we already punched in a little bit from how this scene was shot, but yeah, it was a moment of being not as prepared as I would have liked. So I'm still working on getting commissions. I'm still shooting industrial work. The Canon 5D Mark II had hit the market at this point, and video was starting to become an issue. People were starting to ask, do you shoot video? And I was telling photo editors, no, I'm a photographer, I don't shoot that thing. But I was realizing that if I kept on saying that over and over again, sooner or later they were going to be able to find a videographer that was going to be able to capture what they needed. They didn't really know what they wanted. They just wanted someone to say, yes, we can shoot video, so they would have it in case anyone asked them for it. So this was on a chimney delivery that they brought out to the power plant that's actually right by LaGuardia. It's these super heavy things, so they came in by boat and then loaded them onto these custom trailers and then put them back onto another barge and then brought those up. And I made a time-lapse film of it. It wasn't great. The ending is kind of like, because we like got there, we delivered it, and that was the end of it. And I never went back to follow the installation. But it got me starting to think a little bit about time-lapse and how to get that to work. So, yeah, there's the, I'm up in a cherry picker shooting this. This is like one of my happy places. That's the 533 crane in the background. Yeah, so you can kind of just give you a sense. Those are the trailers that they use to move this stuff around, and those are the sections that they were loading up onto the barge to transport. All right. So Weeks has got a lot of other projects going on, one of which was the construction of the new Willis Avenue Bridge. And one of the other people I had met there told me that he was working on this project and that they're going to be moving it soon. And I was like, listen, I would like to come and shoot this, and what I want to do is make a time-lapse film about the delivery. I'm not going to charge you anything for this because I can't promise it's going to work, but just get me access to this and let me see what I can do. And so I called in all of my favorites. I had like 2 or 3 bodies at this point. I borrowed cameras from friends. I had a rental house, loaned some equipment. I asked all my interns, everyone I could think of, like who will like come and like schlep cameras with me. So let's watch the film before I tell you anything else. Yeah, the audio's coming. So that was like the first truly like successful time-lapse film I had created. And it starts circulating a little bit. It got picked up by some press. The Wall Street Journal ran a story on it, got into a couple of film festivals, got into the Woodstock Film Festival, a few other places, and I got a phone call. And it's like, hi, this is Robin. I'm the Director of Communications with the New York City Department of Transportation. Just saw your Willis Avenue Bridge film. It's a really great film. Couple of things. That's my bridge. And why does your film look better than the one that I paid for? That ends up giving me about a 10 to 15 year long working relationship with the New York City Department of Transportation. My agent at the time, we went in, we met, and started talking. They're like, yeah, you know, it's the purchase award. It's a small purchase. It's only $100,000. We're like, I'm okay with that. And so I brought in a director, I brought in a producer, started bringing in more people, sound, and started producing safety films, still shoots, everything and anything that they needed covered. And then that also branched out to like Vision Zero, and we did a couple of films for the Taxi and Limousine Commission. We shot a music video for kids about street safety. The last major film, last big safety film was in 2019 for truck drivers, because their last like DMV film was 15 years ago, like pre-cell phone, pre-messengers. And it went really well. They screened it at the World Fairgrounds. There's a movie theater there, by the way, if you ever get a chance. There's a cool movie theater. And I'm like stoked, because like all the agencies were happy. It was like a round of applause and everything. Like, this is gonna be great. 2020 is gonna be good. And, anyways, so while I'm doing all those projects and everything, I'm still, you know, I'm exhibiting, I'm talking, lecturing a little bit, and looking for editorial work. I fortunately got a call from the New York Times Magazine, and we did a couple of films for them, one on the Metropolitan Opera, another one on the construction of a new record store in Brooklyn, and that film had a couple of problems. The ending wasn't great. It was like over a weekend, the communication fell off with the magazine a little bit and everything, and the magazine felt bad. And my editor was like, we owe you one. And I was like, really? It's like, the New York Times owes me? I like this. Because I had already done two films for them, but I really wanted to be in the book. I am still a print photographer at heart, and I wanted to get into the actual magazine, to have it printed and circulated. And I knew that the New York Times needed a hook. It needed to be biggest, last, first, something to get it past all of the editing stages. And so I started looking around for the biggest ship. I found a container ship, but Discovery had already done something on there. But the next biggest ship was this refinery that was under construction. And I proposed it to the New York Times. They liked the sound of it, and we brought it to Shell. Shell liked the sound of it, but they were like, that's great. We want to be in the New York Times. We'll send you the pictures. And the New York Times was like, no. This is his idea. He has to be the one to shoot the photographs. And they're like, oh, okay. And so a couple of calls, a couple of months go by and everything. And then the shipyard was like, that sounds great. We'll send the photographer. And they're like, no, this is Stephen's idea. He has to be the one. And so it was just a lot of like back and forth between security, safety, editorial rights, because the New York Times is really like protective of journalism, and they wanted to make sure that there was no editing from the clients. So the compromise that they had is that I had an escort with me at all times. I wasn't allowed to shoot other things in the shipyard, but I had a week of being on the Prelude. And the Prelude is a liquefied natural gas refinery that is 1,600 feet in length. So for reference, if you take the World Trade Center, that is 1,776 feet high. So that is basically the size of this vessel, if you laid the building down. And the reason that they built it was that there was a natural gas reserve off the coast of Australia, and it was too far away to do a pipeline, so they brought the refinery to it. So they built this entire ship which is technically not a ship because it's not self-powered, but that was a whole other problem, and built this refinery on the ship, not a ship, in South Korea, and then towed it down to Australia. And so in the summer of 2014, I was able to go out to South Korea and photograph the construction process. And so this is one of the pictures. I'm up in one of the gantry cranes. The title of this is also one of the exhibitions. The title of this photograph is Some Assembly Required. It is kind of like the IKEA or Lego set from hell. This is inside of one of the cooling tanks. Gas comes up, they have to chill it, they condense it down to liquid, filter it, and then the tanking ships, the liquefied natural gas ships, will come to the Prelude, get the gas, and then it goes up to Hong Kong, because it was a relationship between Shell, Hong Kong, and Australia that financed the whole project. So that's the site of the Prelude. There was never anywhere I was able to shoot the Prelude at full distance because we just couldn't back up far enough. I had a 14 millimeter lens with me, and that still wasn't wide enough to ever get it from edge to edge. But you can see the people there just to give you a little bit of sense of the scale. So that's one of the modules that they had built. It was a very modular process because they built these layer by layer and then built it on a separate pier and brought the modules over and put them on top of the Prelude. And as they were doing this, they realized that they didn't have a big enough crane to pick this thing up, so they built a bigger crane. So I was talking earlier about Weeks Marine, about the crane that they had to pick up Sully's aircraft. That was a 250-ton lift capability at 1 million pounds. This crane is 6,000 tons. It's not a rotating crane. Like, you got to use tugboats to get it to move. But like, it just gives you a little bit of the sense of the scale. This is like essentially a 10-story building that they've picked up that they're moving in the channel. And there it is getting delivered. Here's another screw up on my end that I don't like talking about a lot, but I will tell you now that it's like 10 years ago and I'm, working through these mistakes of the past. I was so psyched about this picture. I was so happy. And the thing that I had, because I had like zoomed in and was like checking all the details and everything, and there was like a shot just before this where there was like, you could see like the guy standing there for this scale reference and everything. And the picture that I missed, because this is not like moving very quickly, I was just so proud of myself about this photograph, is that I missed that tight shot again of just like getting in here where you're gonna be able to see the people. And that was one of those moments, and I've had another photographer, I can't remember his name right now, but he had talked about that, about the monkey moment, where you're the photographer, you're like, ha ha, look at me, I did this great shot. But I kind of missed one of the other crucial moments because I was celebrating this shot, and it's good. But I have always been thinking about that other picture, and I know that I can zoom in and crop into it, but then I'm losing resolution, and I'm not gonna be able to make a great print out of it. So it was just always like kind of stuck in the back of my mind about being careful about not celebrating too quickly. So this brings me to the SS United States. One of the other dream clients was National Geographic. And my former agent had gotten me a meeting years ago with them. And it went well, but nothing really came out of it. And then, I don't know why or how I heard, but it turns out that at that time, if you're a photographer that has a decent portfolio, you can call up National Geographic and get down there to present your work. It wasn't like his magical connections that got me in there. He just knew that he needed to make the phone call and set it up in DC. So I make the phone call, also because one of the editors that I knew from the New Yorker was now down at Nat Geo. So I was able to reach out to her and I was like, hey, I'll bring bagels. And she said yes. So I don't know if it was the bagels or not, but so I'm showing all of the other industrial work that I had shot in the past. And one of the photo editors remembered that one of the writers from Nat Geo that had traveled on this ship when he was a child. And so we reached out to the board to see about getting to photograph this. And if you don't know the story about the SS United States, it was one of the last transatlantic ships that was built. This is like pre-jet era, and they were fighting to keep this out of the scrapyards. It was wet docked in Philadelphia for decades. It is now in Alabama, Missouri, and it is getting prepped to be an artificial reef. So I'm hoping to be there when they sink it. And I've got some of the other like pieces in line because by chance that ship, that other destroyer that was sunk by a company are the same people that are sinking this ship. So I've got like a lot of the connections in place. I just need to make sure that I can get on that ship at the right time to be out there and hopefully not forget my long telephoto zoom that time. But anyway, so we approached the board, who fortunately also was the brother of another photo editor that we know here in New York, and started talking to the executive director and told her about the connection. She was like, absolutely, we can get you down on the ship. So I spent 3 days shooting the SS United States. And one of the other things also that I just wanted to capture was a unique angle, because I had seen the photographs that were online, but it was all from the water level, because everyone was shooting from the pier. And so I told Nat Geo, like, I think the thing that we need is a cherry picker, because drones weren't a thing really yet. And so they got me a cherry picker. So I was able to get up 60 feet to be able to be shooting more parallel to the ship. And then by chance, that same photo editor that was at Nat Geo left National Geographic and went to NPR. And NPR ran a story in 2024, I guess it's like a year and a half now, about that it's going to become a reef. And so they hired me again to shoot it. And so there's a mixture of the new and the old images, but it was kind of nice to be able to get back and shoot this again. This was another happy find when I was out scouting the day before in Philadelphia. I was setting up for my picture because the sun was setting down. This was looking nice and everything. And these people showed up with their tripods, and I was like, don't get in my shot. This is horrible. And then it's like, oh my God, she's painting the ship. So anyway, so she was great. I actually tagged her Instagram when we put the photograph up and everything. So it was all enclosed because it was an Atlantic ship, so it was, it was an all-weather vessel. The Kennedys were on this. I believe Marilyn Monroe also traveled on it. It was like shooting, fish in a barrel. It's just such an amazing location for me. So this is this was from the NPR shoot. I had done a similar photograph years before, but the lighting and the contrast wasn't as strong, and so I had my assistant with me this time, and we put up a silk over the window to like soften the light a little bit. And I've just always been a fan of this. These were all watertight hatches, just in case they ran into trouble. The ship was also funded by the U.S. military because it was a possible ground invasion ship, because we were looking at the possibility of World War III with the Soviet Union. So they were setting this up as a troop carrier as well for a quick conversion if needed. The propellers were like classified until the 1970s because there was something about the edge of it that made the ship incredibly fast. Yeah. Here's my anchor. And this gets to my current project. I was really fortunate getting access to all these locations, but magazines were closing, editors are retiring, consolidation, budget, et cetera, and everything. And I still really wanted to be shooting industrial locations without climbing over or through fences. And I needed something I could shoot without getting permission. We'd moved upstate at this point, and we're across the river from where we live, and these freight trains are rolling by. And I had been photographing trains all my life because I've just always been attracted to them. And this parking lot was right next to this freight line. I was like, there's no fences. I'm allowed to be here. I can shoot. In the past, I would have done this with a long exposure. I would have blurred the cars themselves just to get like a wash of color going through the landscape. But I decided for this project to actually focus on the train car as the muse, because this was something that no other photographer was going to be able to capture. This time, this light, this location was never going to happen again. So it's mine. So I'm greedy like that. I'm sorry, but it was something I wanted to do. So I started traveling and looking for locations out in California. My wife had an exhibition. I stayed for a couple more days. Found this, it's the Cajun Pass. It's this historic location because it's the mountain pass that has like a 6 or 8 degree climb. And I could see the train coming up the mountain and everything, and it's pretty slow because it's got a lot of weight. And I'm noticing that like the first train is looking pretty clean, and I'm just going through the panic stages of don't fuck this up, don't fuck this up, don't fuck this up. You know, make sure I'm on raw, make sure the color balance is right, make sure my focus is locked, all those steps and everything. It's not a brand new engine. It was retrofitted. It was built in the 90s, but I guess it had just come back out of the paint shop and was in immaculate shape. Bear Mountain, this is also one of the cars that I love finding, are these center beam cars, because I love how they frame the landscape. This was on the same shoot in California. Again, finding the open box cars. This is like old technology. You know, the US railways have not changed much from this. There's certain things that have grown and everything, but this is like, you know, century old tech. And so just finding these is a treat. Same thing, these flat cars. This was in Pennsylvania. I was down for an exhibition at a museum, and I found this location. There was a nice little off-road trail that I was able to get to and everything, and I caught this. This was upstate a couple years ago. I love the light. I love the motion of the snow. One of the challenges is finding locations that I can shoot from safely, legally. There was a sheriff there, and he had like pulled in after me and everything, and I was kind of like walking up to the car, and I was like, do you want to, you know, but he wasn't there for me. He was there, I think, for the guys that were like on their ATVs. They were like making noise, and he didn't care that I was shooting. Every once in a while, the cops have asked me to leave, but it hasn't been a problem. This is my homage to the Beckers. This was out at a residency in Nevada, and the smoke in the background is the California wildfires. Every once in a while, it's about the graffiti. I try not to shoot too much of the graffiti as the main subject, but I just loved this. And I had this at an exhibition upstate a few years ago and on graffiti, and one of the artists actually knew the guy and like found his Instagram handle and found a picture of the guy standing in front of this car in one of the rail yards in New York. So he's all masked and everything. And I reached out to him. I was like, hey, do you want to meet? But I don't think he like believes me that I'm just like, I'm a photographer. I'm not like... This is kind of like my Stephen Shore moment about photographing the mundane object, but I just love the unmarked, you know, blue trailer on the train, the color of the sky, the blue and the shadows, and just how all of these elements come together. I set up my camera. I basically pace myself about 30 feet from the train tracks and wait. I have like 3 hours of time between sunrise before the light gets up too high, and then another couple hours in the afternoon, because I need a lot of light, because these trains are moving super fast. So I'm shooting at a high shutter speed. And then also a lot of depth of field, because edge to edge is a challenge. This is one of my cheats. I will admit, this train was not moving. During another residency in California, the artist had a connection with the cement company, and so they got me into the photograph. And so I've just always loved this combination of both kind of like my construction life mixed in with the train car and everything. We got kicked out of this location by the company, even though I had someone from the company with me, because they didn't like the fact that they couldn't see where we were. I guess they were worried I was going to get hit by the gravel, but it's okay. This picture worked. This is also one of my favorite photographs. It is also one of the cheats. I found another quarry in Utah, and as I was like driving around and into it and everything, I found these train cars and this old caboose parked there. So cabooses are basically not in service anymore, but they're still used on certain situations. These are when you've got like hazmat material, the military uses them, and also because this is like a spur line, so like it's a little side line off of the main tracks. And because the locomotives are like 2 miles away, they need to have somebody at the back of the train to be able to like get out, uncouple it, and then I don't know if they walk. I don't know if somebody drives over and picks them up, or the train catches up to them and picks them up. I don't know exactly how all of those details work, but I found this. I was waiting at another track, hoping that some active trains were going to come, and just nothing ever showed up. It was right by the Salt Flats in Utah, but the light was gorgeous. It got a little diffused. I love all of this. The keep trucking by train. All of this, just this, like, so yeah. And that is all I have for today.